to EasterNews. This is Jasmine Felismino, and here are the headlines for today. Instrument of Change. Journey from Chaos to Freedom. Reopening of doors. New challenges. A new phase. Education, her child, a bridge to success. For Instrument of Change, here is Matthew Gabriel Escartin.
Batangas Eastern Colleges is the result of all the hardships and effort, as well as the sacrifices that Mrs. Mercedes Salud de Villa did. She took hold of the opportunity to help others through education and serves as the instrument who would change so many lives for better. Some of the professionals are molded in this school as they have spread their wings and reached their far-off destinations. With Nanay Diding's resilience, she never let limitations and failures to stop her goal on establishing a high school that benefited the town of San Juan and its people. It all started with a dream and a promise. A dream of Nanay Diding and her husband. A promise of providing their children higher grade of education. She knew that education was a key to open up opportunities for better future. At that time, Philippines was under American occupation, wherein public school systems was in its infancy and only a few families mainly could send their children to secondary school. All levels were mainly reserved for elite families. She had her general secondary course, and she excelled in mathematics on her time too. On that degree, she took a risk to establish high school mainly to fulfill her promise and to be an instrument for the town of San Juan. With the help of Mr. Inigo Javier, who also had opened a high school in Quezon Province, and some of the prominent people, building a high school was possible.
For Journey from Chaos to Freedom, here is Althea de Torres.
The two-story white-stoned house of the De Villa family became a high school with completed facilities and school essentials. Outside, there was a small room called the Armory that is a storage for boys' drill activities and paraphernalia. The house was rented by the schools, while the De Villa family temporarily moved to their cramped quarters on the ground floor. There were a total of 112 very eager students ready to start their high school experience at Batangas Eastern Academy, with Mr. Jesus Cuanco as their first principal. In 1941, student enrollment increased to almost 200. Tragically, on December 8, 1941, Japanese military forces launched an attack on Philippine soil. Schools nationwide were forced to shut down, and only elementary schools are allowed to operate. With this, Nanay Diding tried her best to gather all the school materials and equipment that they could hide to keep them safe from Japanese soldiers. There was a day that Nanay Diding was ready to confront the soldiers who came to her door to check the premises. She was very nervous, but she stood and talked confidently. Soldier found nothing and left her alone. Unfortunately, they have to move to one of their farm properties for their safety and lost connection to Mr. Javier. Nanay Diding had a breakdown, reminiscing the days where she worked tirelessly a day and night to collect their needs, and the days where she tossed anything just to meet the amount of money they need. As the war continued, she began to doubt that there would be a chance for the school to reopen. But in 1945, Mrs. Mercedes' hopes and prayers continued that the school operation once again were not in vain. At the beginning of Batangas Eastern Academy, Mr. Javier warned Mrs. De Villa that it was not going to be easy. He provided guidelines to Mrs. De Villa, as well as their plans to offer the subscription of shares of stock to people who were interested in becoming stockholders. They found many who were very supportive, but there are few not too kind remarks expressing that they doubt their ambitious plan. But they did not stop from their goal. They still continued their plan. After they had exhausted all of their efforts to gain financial support, as well as the school essentials, with that, they had came in the decision to sell school shares at 10 pesos per share. In a desperate move, Nanay Diding took property deeds, which she had inherited from her parents, to the bank in the city and even borrowed the needed amount. There were times that she pawned and even sold valuable inherited jewelry and able to make the school to remain open. On March 12, 1940, and on March 16, 1940, the first signing of papers took place. On June 12, 1940, the high school began its operation as Bulbong Institute. As the war was coming for an end, they decided to move to Marinduque for their safety. One fateful afternoon in March 1945, when they boarded the boat that would hopefully lead to their freedom. But that night, a storm was brewing and disaster struck when one boat capsized due to its heavy load and strong waves caused by high winds. Nanay Diding tried her best to keep her children awake all night long. All of Nanay Diding's children survived, but Judge Lopez and his wife lost 5 of their children. That makes her younger sister very ill and never recovered. Through this, Nanay Diding became stronger. When the wars ended, schools reopened and their family returned to their town.
Reopening of doors. Daniela Delen as the news.
In 1945, Batangas Eastern Colleges reopened its door to about 250 students. BEC maintained a standard of education. As the school needed more space, Nanay Diding and her family moved to a renovated house on the lot adjacent to the school that Nanay Diding owned. She continued to dedicate all her time to BEC, actively participating in the life and policy guidance of the school. The crowning glory of her efforts was witnessing her own children pass through the school and go on to pursue their dreams. On June 13, 1946, was again granted official recognition as a complete high school. In 1947, former President Laurel of Tanawan honored BEC with his presence at the graduation ceremony. President Laurel delivered a rousing speech with a line that edged everyone who was present. You cannot preach democracy to people with empty stomachs. Nanay Diding's commitment never fades. She continued to advise young people and their parents about the value of education whenever she had the opportunity. In 1970, PEA decided to reopen the college program with more improvements so students are encouraged to learn more to get their bachelor's degree in their other colleges. Unfortunately, 2 years later, the declaration of martial law was announced by Ferdinand Marcos. Schools were forced to shut down during this, and it would take a while before BEA could reopen again. BEA was changed drastically when technology was getting major upgrades. The white stone house where the very first classes took place was destroyed, along with the old basketball court which was turned into a new gym. In July 2008, BEA or Batangas Eastern Academy was renamed to BEC or Batangas Eastern Colleges.
New challenges. Charlewin Recinto as the news.
In 1970, BEA, also known as BIA, decided to reopen the college program with more improvements so students are encouraged to learn more to get their bachelor's degree in other colleges. Unfortunately, 2 years later, the declaration of martial law was announced by Ferdinand Marcos. Schools were forced to shut down during this, and it would take a while before BIA could reopen again.
For a new face, here is Daniela Delen.
In 1970, PEA decided to reopen the college program with more improvements so students are encouraged to learn more to get their bachelor's degree in their other colleges. Unfortunately, 2 years later, the declaration of martial law was announced by Ferdinand Marcos. Schools were forced to shut down during this, and it would take a while before BEA could reopen again. BEA was changed drastically when technology was getting major upgrades. The white stone house where the very first classes took place was destroyed, along with the old basketball court which was turned into a new gym. In July 2008, BEA or Batangas Eastern Academy was renamed to BEC or Batangas Eastern Colleges.
Education, her child, a bridge to success. Charlewin Recinto as the news.
Dr. Mario S. de Villa, the BEA president in 1999 to 2001, proposed to change the date of Foundation Day to February, the month when Nanay Diding was born. He hired an artisan to create a bust of Nanay Diding to celebrate Foundation Day annually. He rejected the artisan's work twice until he decided to do it all by himself. He created the bust carefully and gracefully, perfectly replicating her mother's facial features, until he was satisfied. He also added the mole in her cheek, in which he removed in her surgery. After over 80 years, BEA or BEC is still going strong and will hopefully continue as time goes on. After the previous events, Nanay Diding was still not satisfied with her current success. The institution doesn't have high school institutions yet, and parents are asking for help since there are none nearby. BIA decided to diverge in Buhay na Sapa in 1947. The deal, however, did not go as planned, and it was decided that it would close down. But the Buhay na Sapa branch did not close until 1953. This made the students enrolled to increase very fast, and BIA had to focus more on the main campus for development. She was planning to have her children convinced to become a teacher to help her at BIA. Mrs. Mercedes de Villa enrolled her two eldest daughters in Centro Escolar University so they can learn for their career as a teacher. She also wished that her youngest daughter, Libertad, would be convinced to become a teacher and not have other plans in mind, because most of the graduates had plans on applying for jobs in other countries, notably in the United States. Mr. Jesus de Villa, Mrs. Mercedes' oldest son, was the sport coach of the school. He coached the athlete of the school and motivated all of them to work harder for the sports competition. He also wrote the lyrics of the school march, BEA the Pioneer. Miss Libertas S. de Villa, also known as Mrs. Salud, became the principal until 2000. Genero S. Jean took her place after Mrs. Salud retired. Mrs. Lorelei A. Galit became the next principal after Dr. Jean.